Hello and welcome along to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison with Ian Doyle, David Lynch and Keifer MacDonald all with me. We'll talk about the Champions League trip to Ajax, which comes later on this week in a short while. But we'll start with the defeat to Nottingham Forest on Saturday first. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about that, Doyle. You were there. A couple of important wins for Liverpool last week, but then another setback, another performance that really wasn't very good from the Reds on Saturday.
No, it wasn't much of a surprise given he wasn't there, which was most players. I think Klopp said after the game, probably the most encouraging thing is that Klopp knew exactly why they'd lost. He just went through and explained it. It'd be more of a worry if he didn't know why they played the way that they did. I mean, let's be honest, Forest weren't very good. They just ran around a lot and got in the way. And defensively, they weren't particularly great at set pieces. Liverpool had loads of chances. They just couldn't put them away. I think somebody needs to recalibrate Virgil van Dijk's head, because I don't know what he was doing half the time. Seems to be clearing it. But, you know, these things happen. I mean, it was there with a few of the old regulars. Neil Jones was sat next to me, and after 20 minutes turned to him and said, "This is Leicester away last season." And it ended up being almost exactly the same. There was just no missed penalty this time. So I suppose that's a bit of progress. But, yeah, I mean, Forest, as I said before, Forest, very limited team. Got the tactics right defensively, but even then, Liverpool got enough set pieces to have scored. Didn't conceded a terrible goal. Came obviously from Joe Gomez, who wasn't particularly great on the day. He made a mistake, didn't he? Made the foul on the halfway line. Liverpool just didn't defend it. And even then, Forest nearly didn't score. The post for the first shot. And it was slightly fortunate that it came straight back to him. Could have gone anywhere. So, you know, in that sense, I think what's interesting to point or important to point out is that, you know, Klopp said after the game is very intense, 3 games in a week. You know, I know some people say, yeah, but what about everybody else? Okay, well, let's have a look at everybody else. Tell me how many teams won 3 games last week.
What, in the world?
None of them. None of them.
Question.
In the Premier League, not one of those 20 teams won all 3 games that they had played in that week. Not a single one. 3 of them got 7 points, which was Fulham, Newcastle, and Leicester. And obviously, Arsenal and City were supposed to play and didn't. But even they wouldn't have got 9 points because City lost to Liverpool and Arsenal drew with Southampton. So it's not just Liverpool who've struggled a little bit in terms of the intensity of the games they all have. So I suppose and then you could argue, well, Liverpool played at Forest. Well, they should be beating them. Well, they beat Man City 1-0. So, you know, I'm pretty sure if the scores were the other way around, nobody would be too surprised. It's just a little bit annoying. There's the fact that it's gone like that. So I just think that, it wasn't a great result. Just it's a setback in the sense of they just get a bit of momentum, but they've still won 5 of the last 8. And you can kind of see why they lost that game. Doesn't mean that it's right or that it was good enough. And you know, you could argue about the team selection, but then there's obviously a reason why Jordan Henderson didn't play. We know why Thiago didn't play. We know why Curtis Jones had to play centre mid. We know why Nunez didn't play. We know where Konate, Matip, Diaz, Jota, the others that I can't remember. There's so many of them. We know why. You look at Curtis Jones. He comes in for his first start since May, wasn't it? First start since May at Southampton, and he has to play in centre mid. I'd love to know the last time he played centre mid at any level. You know, so it's difficult for him. But and then you're just looking at the same players who I know Lynch has got some thoughts on this. Same players that haven't been doing particularly well. You look at Fabinho, who seems to have forgotten to run. You do wonder whether or not he's still, because everyone forgets at the end of last season that he got injured, didn't he? And he was rushed back for the Champions League final. And is the World Cup playing a part for these players? Are they thinking, I've got a slight injury, I don't really want to miss out on this World Cup, even if they're not openly saying that or thinking that? It might just be at the back of their minds, that they're human beings. So we'll see. But I do think I do think the World Cup is now starting to play on the minds of players, I think, across all the teams, to be honest. I think it's kind of the loitering, and I think the clubs now just desperately want to get these games out the way and just basically take the break and take stock, which is why Liverpool's defeat is more frustrating, because you'd think, well, beat City, beat West Ham, they can win the 2 home games and win at Forest, and suddenly they've taken at least 15 points from 18 and they're way up the table. So missed opportunity more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there that Curtis Jones had to play in a midfield, but Lynchy, it struck me as being interesting that they stuck with the 4-4-2. I know that the Thiago thing came late, and we're not quite sure. Maybe Jones was meant to play on the left-hand side instead of Carvalho, and they've had to change that late on. But it did just strike me with that 11 that they had. They could have just played 4-3-3. Curtis Jones in a position that suits himself better. Carvalho on the left-hand side of the 3. They did have the players to change things up. but they went with the 4-4-2 when a couple of those players just didn't particularly look comfortable, Jones being one of them.
Yeah, I think it sort of, it took Klopp a lot to change away from that, didn't it? From the 4-3-3, having relied on it for so long, and there'd been a lot of calls for him to do that for a long while, and he resisted it, and then has eventually changed. And I suppose in his head, wants to create some sort of momentum and stick to this, and is really reluctant to change again back to the old system, because you don't want to be maybe chopping and changing every week. Although you do see other managers do that a lot. I don't think it would really harm Liverpool to go back to 4-3-3 for possibly one game, particularly if this is a game against sort of weaker opposition. You could have argued that maybe the 4-3-3 would have made more sense away to Arsenal as well. It was another example of where you could have maybe just switched back there, but again, he obviously just wants to say, well, this is our new system now. This is how we play. Let's get some rhythm up in this. And he, stuck to it again. And I don't think it particularly worked with the players that they had, because I looked at the starting 11 and just thought there was several areas where you thought they're going to have problems here, and so it proved. Just a poor performance overall. And you can sometimes come out on the right side of those. Liverpool have in the past, but I think Jurgen Klopp alluded to that actually in his press conference after the match. Sort of said, there's been games where we've been like this before, and have come out with a win. We've scored from the set pieces, but you look at the expected goals, and I know it's not everyone's favourite measure, but I think it gave you a good idea of the fact that basically the chances were even. The game, Liverpool had turned the game into a bit of a coin flip, really, about whether they were going to win or not. And in the past, when they've sort of ground out wins, it's been on the basis of not really giving any away, and then taking the one or two that you create. So in a way, deserving the win. Whereas this time, I just think, look at the performance overall, and I just think, you could have said a draw was maybe a fair result, or you're leaving it open to the idea that Nottingham Forest take one of their chances, which they did, and then won. So I'm not sure I agree with him about that, really, that he thought Liverpool were decent and maybe just a bit unlucky, or just didn't take the chances. I thought it was another poor performance. And I think, Doyle is right, 5 wins out of 8, that sounds pretty good. But, I'd say the West Ham performance wasn't perfect either. I think there's a lot of issues there as well. And then you're looking, that's quite a few patchy performances and amongst some wins. And, we thought maybe after the City game, or we've constantly thought this season that Liverpool are turning a corner. But I'll be honest, I'm just not massively convinced. I keep looking at the teams they're putting out. I keep looking at certain players, and I think there are big issues with this team. And I don't think there's a corner to be turned. I think this Liverpool team is going to be like this for the rest of the season. I think this is a transitional season with a lot of question marks over a lot of positions and a lot of different players. And I think there's going to be a lot of pain before now and the end of the season, to be honest.
Terminal decline, is it?
Well, possibly, yes. Doyle laughs at me for using this phrase in a WhatsApp chat that we're in. But I think, terminal decline makes it sound like Liverpool get relegated and never come back up again, and they're absolutely finished. I don't believe that, but I believe this team, or the Jurgen Klopp team that had so much success, large elements of knee gutting. And to be honest, that process has already started, by the way. You had Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho starting on either flank for Liverpool at the weekend, and 2 absolutely massive talents. I think they're going to have a big part to play. But when you're doing that, that's 3 Premier League goals between them in their entire careers. From what we're used to, the level that Liverpool are at, that is a significant drop-off. Then we've obviously got the Nunez situation going on, where he's been much better recently, but still a lot of sort of, rough edges to knock off his game. So, you add all that in together, then Fabinho is clearly struggling at the moment. I think Jordan Henderson is not the player he was, which is absolutely fine, by the way. He's 32. He's put a lot of sort of miles in his legs. That's absolutely fine. So, but then you add all these things up, plus the injuries that Liverpool have got, which is another significant factor which deserves discussion. But yeah, the sum total is basically a team that is really struggling at the moment, and I don't think it's just going to click. I don't think you'll get all your injured players back as well, and it will suddenly solve itself, because a lot of the issues are not relating to injuries and are long term and things that need solving, really.
We'll come back to Fabinho in a little while, but I'll bring you, Keifer, in now on sort of the bit of a pattern, really. Liverpool still not won away from home in the Premier League this season, and I take the point that, Everton, Arsenal, Manchester United, they've not exactly had easy away fixtures so far, but Fulham and Nottingham Forest now, it's kind of been, as Lynch said, a bit of a flip of a coin at certain times. And that's a bit of a concern for me as well, that obviously, we are a little way into the season now and Liverpool haven't managed to get that done. The longer it goes, the sort of bigger that issue will grow.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously Jurgen Klopp kind of passed it off, didn't he, in his post-match press conference, and he kind of just said, not to look at it as a collective kind of pattern, but more as in the individual circumstances around each game, which is obviously fair enough. But I think that what it feels like this season is that for starters, I think Liverpool won 13 of the 19 away games last season, which obviously just shows you kind of how important it is to get those points on the board. But I think the manner in which they're losing the games, it feels to be very repetitive in terms of dominating possession. As David said there, they're not creating too many chances, and it feels like the opposition are maybe racking up an XG close to 2, and they're being clinical, which is something we've obviously seen from Liverpool in recent years. But it now seems that they're the ones kind of getting punished ruthlessly, and even to the home games, in the sense of the West Ham game the other night, it felt like they were never going to get that second goal, and that obviously carried into the game on Saturday, and the struggles continued. It just felt like it felt like a game crying out for Thiago Alcantara, and obviously I know it's not his fault that he got an ear infection or whatever, but I know it was a young midfield, but it just felt like they were never going to break them down. They could have been playing for another 60 minutes, and it just felt like it was side to side. And I think obviously some sympathy there is for the likes of Curtis Jones, who even I thought to bring him on Wednesday against West Ham with the kind of game in the balance. I think he came on with half an hour left. I thought that was a particularly bizarre decision. Obviously I know he needs minutes, but he just didn't feel like the right kind of game to maybe throw him into, especially against West Ham side that have been building confidence in recent weeks. You'd probably look maybe to the Ajax game where Liverpool only need a point to qualify, and that would have maybe been a more ideal situation for him. But obviously we know how he's done this season, but again, it still feels like he's kind of working his way into this Liverpool side and kind of finding his best position, and obviously Liverpool trying to work with him too, and then it just kind of culminated in terms of Liverpool not being able to break them down. And like I said, that's something that we've seen consistently away from home this season. And, obviously it is a problem. And obviously, again, on another day, if you kind of, you think of if Liverpool did have not even a fully fit squad, but even just some of the players they've lost in recent weeks, the likes of Luis Diaz, Darwin Nunez, obviously, Diogo Jota, who's kind of been so integral to this kind of, this new formation, this 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, whatever you want to call it. You'd like to think Liverpool would have created more in the final third, and maybe not been so heavily reliant on set pieces, which they were on Saturday. So, I mean, it is a difficult one, because it feels like, while this Liverpool team isn't the same animal it was a couple of years ago, it feels like every kind of time they are losing games, there's so many different caveats to their, performances that it's hard to kind of isolate it down to, to one issue of maybe, what it might be. Obviously, David spoke there on, obviously, the likes of Jordan Henderson and those kind of players that have, aging. I mean, you only have to look at the team at Old Trafford. It was, he dropped Fabinho, didn't he? And it was James Milner and Jordan Henderson starting at Old Trafford, which, even at any year is going to be, make it a difficult task. But then the other side of that is that you've got to play, youthful, inexperienced players who maybe aren't used to those occasions yet. So I think Liverpool are kind of caught in, catch-22 at the moment in terms of, which way they're kind of, heading with it. And, it doesn't get any easier, does it? I know Tottenham lost last night, but, if it's anything like the game last year, last December, obviously a very frantic game. I think Tottenham could have been 3-up after about 20 minutes. So, you just think, hopefully Liverpool can get that kind of first away win of the season. That'll kind of, close that noise down and maybe allow them to focus on, other areas, because, it is a concern, especially, obviously the home form has been good in recent years, but, it's pointless essentially beating Man City and then dropping points to Nottingham Forest. I know, obviously, Doyle said you could swap them around, but, you're dropping 3 needless points after such a graft last week against City, and again, when City go and beat Brighton as they did and kind of respond like that, it's I think it's very obviously deflating for everyone kind of around, isn't it?
Yeah, the midfield we've talked about a number of times so far this season, but let's talk about Fabinho, Doyle. I mean, I'm hoping that he just needs a big rest and that the World Cup can do him a bit of good and he can get his legs back again. But I don't know whether it is that simple. It is a bit more of a long-term thing at this point. It's been a while since we saw him at his best.
Yeah, it looks like he can't run anymore. Which he's, jokingly in the squad, they always say that, he's the slowest player, but, come on, be able to move your legs a bit faster. I know we've said this as a kind of a joke, but, is there anybody here who's recently had a child, David? And, Fabinho's had one. You wonder how much kip he's getting.
I'm still playing well on a Tuesday night, I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not affecting my form.
David's no slower than he was before.
But you get my point. No, there's got to be some reason. I mean, he's never. I mean, the thing with Fabinho is that whenever there's a kind of like a change in tactic, it takes him quite a while. I mean, I think personally speaking, there's loads of stuff that's combined to make him be not very good. the fact that he was injured towards the end of last season, the fact there wasn't much of a break between the seasons, the fact that in the summer there wasn't much of a pre-season because he's one that needs to get up to speed, the fact that the team around him aren't doing particularly great and his other midfielders are either not there or they're not 100%, the fact that the change in formation, as I was going to say just then, is that when they change formation, it takes him a while to get used to it. Look what happened when he first joined. So, and probably some other bits. So I do think that, that's kind of it. Also, how old is he now? 28, 29. He's not had that much pace to start. He's always never had much pace, but what he can rely on is positioning, and his positioning now. I mean, the number of times this season where I've thought, hang on, where's he going? Like going upfield, and he never really used to do that. That's got to be something that's been mentioned to him by the coaching staff. It's the only thing that it can be. Otherwise, they'd be saying to him, get back and offer more protection to the back four, because there's two of them there now. Maybe he thinks that he can wander off. I don't know. But there were a number of times against, and I know Liverpool like to play in the front foot, and against Forest, they had so much of the ball that in the first half in particular, Van Dijk was playing in midfield for parts of the time. So, Fabinho had to push up because there was literally no other room for him to be there. But what that meant is that when Liverpool were then, Forest countered, you were then relying on the back two to sort things out, and Forest had runners from midfield. As anybody who's watched Liverpool under Klopp knows, if a team's got runners from midfield, that's the one where you can get at Liverpool. But that's because you can just overwhelm Fabinho, and if he's not there, then that's obviously a bit of an issue because where is he? So, and then of course on Saturday you had the whole Curtis Jones thing of him not normally playing in that position. I thought he did all right, to be honest. I disagree with Keifer about Wednesday, by the way. I thought he had to come on because Carvalho wasn't really doing much, so I didn't see there was any difference there. I didn't see anything different the club could do, and that's the worry. We go back to you were talking before about breaking down defences. Liverpool have bought 4 players in the past 2 years whose basically sole job is to break down packed defences. Diaz, Nunez, Thiago and Jota, and all 4 of them were injured against Forest. So it was the worst game for them all to not be available in some ways. So again, these are just reasons, not excuses. That's just what it's like. And I know some fans will say, well, why didn't they sign somebody else? It's like, well, hang on. I think they had 3 forwards injured, didn't they? On Saturday, 3 forwards unavailable. So they couldn't really play 4-3-3 because they wouldn't have had enough players. And even then you say, well, what about the youngsters? Kate Gordon, he's not played all season. He's not played since February. Don't think it is. So it's tough, but I do think go back to what Lynch was saying about the formation. I think they have to just stick with it, I suspect. I think they're going to have to. There's no point changing it around. Not yet. I think the time will come where they can start moving things around when they get the players back. Then, because the players all know how to play the 4-3-3, so they can switch to that. They played 4-2-3-1 in the past. I know this is more 4-4-2. What was interesting, actually, is that Klopp did an interview after the West Ham game. I think it was to one of the foreign broadcasters. And he mentioned about, we're looking into ways to get Salah and Nunez in a central position, which would suggest possibly a more of a 4-4-2 or certainly a 4-4-1-1. And then that would be interesting because then, obviously, the argument about Salah is that he needs to be nearer the goal. Well, yeah, he does, like he was on Saturday, but he also needs to get some passes as well. And he didn't really get much. He had that one that, was it from the free kick where he lost it in the sun? I think that was that one. That was about the only chance, wasn't it, for him? So, I think it's not just on him that he didn't score on Saturday. He needs to get some passes. But again, these are just things that happened. So I don't agree it's terminal decline, as Lynchy says. I wrote this actually in the summer saying, remember the start, I'm going to mention it again, remember the podcast at the start of the season where you were all like, yeah, Liverpool going to win loads. And I was like, they're going to win nothing. Because it's a...
Is that direct quote? Yeah.
Yeah, exact quote was. And, where are you going to finish in the league? I said second or third, didn't I, with Tottenham. I didn't expect Arsenal to be this good. But, Arsenal, I do think the World Cup might kill Arsenal a little bit. I think the last thing they need is 7 weeks off. So, yeah, I knew this would be kind of a transformation of a season. The only good thing is that for all of this, how many points are Liverpool off the top 3? Is it 7 with a game in hand? I think it's that, isn't it? Or 6?
Yeah, the 5 off the top 4, is it?
Yeah. So it's not that bad. And as Keifer said, they played loads of really hard games already this season, games where they wouldn't normally win anyway. So I do think that I said before, that's the only thing about the Forest game, is because it's a game they should have won, a game they could have won, a game if they'd have won, we'd have all been like, even if it had been exactly the same level of performance and they took 1 or 2 of those chances, then you'd be going, well, they just got, they did what they had to do. Problem is, they forgot the bit about scoring.
Yeah, we'll come back to Salah in a second. I believe he only completed 6 passes all game, which kind of sums up how isolated he was in that match. But I'll let you have you say, Lynchy, on the midfield and Fabinho. You already promised that you've got some stuff to say on him, so I'll let you jump in.
To be honest, Fabinho, obviously I agree with everyone that he's been poor this season. I think I'm not quite as convinced that he's on the slide that maybe others are. He's not at an age where you think that physical decline should be happening just yet, and he's not. He's not been at Liverpool for as long as some, and so he's not quite got as much in his legs. I think his biggest problem at the moment is possibly that the spaces around him are huge. And that is a huge problem if you're a player who doesn't, as is rightly pointed out, has never been really that quick anyway. I think he's at his best when the spaces around him are small and he's basically just cleaning up little pockets and using his physicality. And that's not happening at the moment. He's having constantly changing midfield partners, this change of shape, all these things are going on around him. And I think that's causing him real problems. So he's not just there to sweep up. And I think that's a big part of the issue and why he's not looked that good. You look at the Man City game, I thought he was very good in that one. And that's because Liverpool were tight as anything. So the spaces were small and he could just do his job. And that's not really been the case for a lot of this season. So I'm not, it's not that I'm not worried about him, but I think, if Liverpool start getting things right in terms of the mix in midfield and start keeping the best midfield fit for longer than 2 or 3 games at a time, then that sort of situation will maybe solve itself. I think, we spoke, didn't we, about the possibility of change of shape going in there. I felt for Curtis Jones really a little bit being just dropped into that too. He clearly didn't have the fitness to do that. He's been out for such a long time. And it wasn't really fair to ask him to do that. And then equally not fair on Fabinho to ask him to sort of clean all that up as well. So, yeah, Liverpool's midfield is an ongoing issue that I don't think will be fully solved without some serious work doing to it in terms of the transfer market. But obviously, for now, they can't do that. So if you can just keep Fabinho and Thiago on the pitch for as much as possible, that would probably solve a lot of problems that they've got.
Yeah, it all sort of links in as well, Keifer, with the creativity. And obviously we mentioned before the chances that Liverpool did have all came from the set pieces. They all pretty much fell to Virgil van Dijk, who for some inexplicable reason tried to pass rather than shoot on the first of those occasions. But it does all link together, doesn't it? I mentioned Salah being isolated. Firmino hardly got a kick as well. What's the solution, do you think, in terms of that? Obviously, the players in there you'd expect to be a little bit more creative, albeit there's a lot of injuries. You've got Carvalho, you've got Elliott, you've got players in there that you'd think would be able to help link that up, but it just didn't quite happen. I'm
hopeful Darwin Nunez will be the solution, to be honest. I know Klopp said after, didn't see that, they were missing those runs in behind, and I know obviously a lot of people have kind of mocked that in the opening weeks where, people have praised him for his kind of movement. Maybe not got the goals that Erling Haaland's got, but especially against West Ham, I thought he was a constant threat. He was a menace in behind, and I think against a team who set up in the way that Forest did, I think just being able to drag a defender out or even just occupy both the centre halves, I think that really would have helped those those 4 players maybe behind him just have an extra touch, an extra free pass, or a kind of a channel to play into, because ultimately that wasn't the case. And even for Salah, I think it would have helped him as well, because he seems to get doubled up on now, especially when there's a free centre half and he can cover with the right back. And we know that this season he has struggled, and maybe there was more onus on him to maybe go inside in the absence of Nunez. But you look at the amount of crosses that were going into the box, it felt like it really would have been a game for him. And I know it's easy to say in hindsight, because if Liverpool win 2 or 3-0, they had the chances to do so. I don't think anyone's mentioning kind of Nunez's absence, but you'd hope for that, if he returns which is likely against Ajax, and he can continue his goal scoring form and just kind of continue that relationship with those behind him, the likes of Elliott, Carvalho, and obviously soon to be Curtis Jones. You'd hopefully that is the solution, because obviously Liverpool pay big money for him. And yeah, I mean, the Van Dijk chances are pretty inexcusable. I'm not quite sure what he's doing for the first one. Even if he is offside, you just think he'd put it in the back of the net and kind of let VAR and the linesman kind of deal with it, after. But it probably just kind of just sums up the kind of afternoon, as Doyle said. It was very reminiscent of that game at Leicester last year, wasn't it? Where I think Marnie misses that chance, doesn't he, in the second half. He skies it 1-on-1 with Kasper Schmeichel, and they never kind of get a foot back in the game. And obviously, you'd be hoping that they can kind of follow a similar suit, because after that it was the game against Chelsea, wasn't it? And they kind of went on that mammoth run for the rest of the season and really put the foundations in for that quadruple chase that ended up being so close to to a historic achievement. So yeah, fingers crossed. Like I say, if Nunez can kind of get back on the pitch and kind of continue where he left off against West Ham and even against City, I thought again demonstrated his ability to kind of pull defenders out wide. And I know he should have probably played a better pass for two of those situations, but again, he showed kind of what he can offer to the Liverpool side, and even if he's not directly involved in goals, what he can offer for those around him.
I think just on that, I think with Nunez, it's a really good point in that he probably wouldn't have made Liverpool play better, but he seems to end games with like 7 shots to his name. And I just think in a game like that where it's ugly and the ball's bouncing around and you can't really play prettiest football, it probably would have been really helpful to have him there, just as physical presence to drag people around, and also to, like I said, he gets shots away, and that is really handy in a game like that where you just need to score a couple of ugly goals and get out there.
Yeah, one goal. It felt like whichever way it was going to be scored, that would kind of be it. If Liverpool had got that first goal, but of course we all know the pattern of that. I can't exactly remember the numbers around it, but they've not exactly been particularly brilliant at scoring first in matches recently. But a frustrating one for Liverpool over the weekend. We'll move on though to Ajax in the Champions League. Doyle, you're heading over there, of course. Liverpool know a point will get them through to the knockout phase. Are you expecting them to get the job done?
Yeah, I'm fine in about 6 minutes, I think, after this podcast. It feels as though we're going that early. Do I expect them to get it done? I mean, Ajax haven't been very good, have they? There's a massive... I mean, even before they even played Liverpool, the manager was talking up, look, there's a big gap between us and the other teams in the group. Possibly not Rangers, actually. I think he just meant Napoli and Liverpool. And, yeah, I do think that Liverpool should get it done. I think they'll have a really strong team, which I know we'll come on to. I suspect they might be really strong just to get it done. I do think that might help in a way, because I'm not saying they're going to chuck it, but it's going to take something remarkable to finish top of the group. They just need to get through, and it might mean that they can do a load of changes next week. So if they can just get it done now. I mean, if they lose 3-2, they get through. I mean, even if they get beat 2-1, they're almost certainly going to go through, provided they don't get absolutely tonked by Napoli on the last day because of the head-to-head. Then it would go on, because obviously 2-1, same head-to-head. It would go on goal difference if Ajax win and win against Rangers and Liverpool lose against Napoli. And if it's 3-2, then Liverpool had a better head-to-head results against Napoli. So they could even afford to get beat, although I'm pretty sure they can't really afford to do that after what happened on Saturday. So I'm expecting a good performance from them. I think they'll have Thiago back. I think Nunez will back. Said we'll do the team in a bit. I think they'll be really strong. I think they'll just want to get it done. And of course, they won't have played since Saturday morning. They don't play again till Saturday night, so it couldn't go any better in terms of the players, getting them out there, getting them fit, making sure that they're fresh. Doesn't really impact anything else. And as I said, it means that they can have a look at the Napoli game next week, prepare properly for the Tottenham game, and then they've got Derby in the League Cup, finish with Southampton at home. So getting something will not only help them in the Champions League, it'll also help in the Premier League over the next couple of games. So I do think they'll get it done. Yeah.
In terms of coming first and second as well, Lynch, it's not necessarily a big advantage to come top of the group. The main thing is just to get yourself through. Obviously, that depends on what happens in some of the other groups, but it's not really something you can be strategic about, and it's certainly not something you can be strategic about when you've just been absolutely battered by Napoli in the last game.
No, absolutely. You've just got to take getting through in any way that you can. And I think, with finishing first and second, it's always nice to finish first because I think it shows that you've played well and you've deserved to do it. And you look at last year when Liverpool sort of won every game in the group stages, that it'd be ideal to be doing that again. But I think that you've got to just take it as it comes and sort of say, well, they got thumped in that first game at Napoli, and coming from that point onwards, you think, all right, well, you sort of realign what your expectations are around the group, and getting through a group that also features Ajax, you've got to be happy with that. I know they're not at Liverpool's strength, but this has been a difficult start to the season for Liverpool, and Ajax away could be it's not an easy game on paper, I don't think. So I think if you can come through this one and get the result they need to get them through, they'll be happy to get it done early, and that could be important for sort of doing some squad rotation later in the group stages, just to take those couple of games out of it, because I think that's been part of Liverpool's struggle as well, is that yes, the injuries have been adding up and all these other problems have been going on around it, The games are coming thick and fast constantly as well, and there's not scope to really put maybe young players in and things like that. So that's made it even more difficult for Klopp. So I think he'll really, really want to get this done. And I agree with Doyle. I think it's going to be a stronger team, which we will talk about, and I think that will help. And then, yeah, I think that you'd hopefully see a reaction as well to Saturday's game, and the way the game's fell it's fallen quite nicely. So yeah, we just hope for an improvement on what we saw at the weekend.
Yeah, you've got to expect a reaction, haven't you, Keifer, after what happened at the weekend? The players will, obviously want to get it done ahead of playing Napoli, but they'll want to show that they can bounce back from Saturday too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's one thing you probably can't question about this Liverpool side under Jurgen Klopp over the past 7 or so years, it's their ability to bounce back in kind of at the lowest moments. And I know obviously this is kind of nothing compared to some of the setbacks they've had in recent years, but they've got the mentality there, and like we touched on earlier, it's a lot of the same players still involved. A lot of the players who are in Kiev were part of that team that missed out on the title by 1 point as well, and then won it the next year. So I think obviously while you can question a lot of their maybe performances this season and maybe the tiredness from last season and kind of the lengths they've been to in recent years, I don't think you can really question their mentality. And hopefully, like I say, they'll go strong on Wednesday night against Ajax and kind of get their position in the group wrapped up. Like we say, it'll take something mammoth to kind of get that top spot on the final day against Napoli. So it'd probably be as good as done come Wednesday night. And then, like you say, you can go into the game. You've got plenty of rest ahead of Saturday night's game against Leeds, and then hopefully, if you can make a few rotations against Napoli, and then again, you're looking pretty good going into the Tottenham game, and then you've got the final few weeks ahead of the World Cup. So, yeah, I think tomorrow could, while it's maybe not turning massive corners, it just may be good to get a win back on the board and put down a marker if they can get a couple of goals, keep a clean sheet again. Not a statement victory, but just kind of get that confidence back amongst themselves, and hopefully, like I say, get a few players back on the pitch as well, the likes of Thiago, Nunez. Maybe Canate might be involved on the bench or in some capacity. Get Trent back involved. So yeah, it wouldn't be positive to take if it kind of goes to plan for Liverpool on Wednesday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that in mind, we will pick our teams for the game. Doyle, I'll come to you first. Obviously, Addison in goal. Could be 1 or 2 changes across the back four, but what do you reckon it might be?
Will it be Addison in goal though? Yes, it will. It might not be the next game or the Derby game, it has to be said. So I expect to see Kelleher in at least one of those. Alisson, Trent, Van Dijk, Robertson, and I'd just put Canate back in. Simple as that.
Canate from the start, Lynchy?
Yeah, I think so. Just because the layoff wasn't too long, and I think the Klopp will be probably keen to sort of get him back in, really, because I think he sees him as his first choice alongside Van Dijk, to be honest. And maybe Gomez didn't help his case either by playing as he did at Forest at the weekend, even though he was fantastic against City the other week. So yeah, I think he'll be keen to get Canate back in there, and then the rest probably picks itself in terms of bringing Alexander-Arnold in, Robertson, and obviously Van Dijk stays in there.
Yeah, no Trent at the weekend, Keifer. So imagine he would come in this one. If it's the same back four for you, you might as well talk us through your midfield as well.
So I've gone for the 4-4-2 then. So I've gone for Elliott on the right, Thiago and Fabinho. As you imagine, Thiago will be fit. I think they've only lost one game together when they started, haven't they? Obviously the Champions League final against Madrid. So keep that run going. And then I've gone for Carvalho on the left. I don't think either of them covered themselves in glory the other night, but I don't think it was through fault of trying. I thought just the energy they kind of bring and something different. You might even put Curtis Jones out on that left. He played there kind of at younger age groups, but I would expect it to be Elliott and Carvalho.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different to you. I'm going to go with Jones on the left. I think Henderson might play as well. Obviously, didn't start even though Thiago wasn't there on Saturday. Doyle, which way are you going to go for in midfield?
It's the 4-2-3-1. I'm going to have Henderson and Thiago. And I'll come back to the others. Okay,
Lynchy, midfield?
Yeah, I think you've got to see Henderson coming in, and I think Fabinho, they're just going to keep dragging him in and out until something sort of fixes itself. So probably Henderson and Thiago in there, and then there isn't I don't know. It's a difficult one with the sort of what's in front of that, I suppose, because in those wide positions you don't really you don't have an awful lot of choice, I suppose, because of the injuries that they've got on the left-hand side. So I suppose, the obvious choice to go there is if Nunez is available, which we hope he will be, is to maybe put sort of Carvalho on that left-hand side, then you've got Firmino, Salah on the right, and Nunez going up top. The manager doesn't have an awful lot of options. I suppose you could flip it, put Salah back up top and Elliott on the right-hand side, but I don't think that worked particularly well, and you're putting a lot on those two youngsters to have them in the team at the same time if you do that. So, I think he'll try and avoid doing that if Nunez is fit.
Keifer, you've told us your midfield 4, so your front 2?
We would go for Firmino and Nunez. I was thinking about going Salah, but I think, as Lynch just pointed on then, I think sometimes when Elliott and Salah do play on that same side, especially in those kind of, you'd expect Liverpool to have a lot of the ball. I think sometimes they do kind of get in each other's way a bit. So I think also it's like we said, Liverpool should have enough to get through it. And I think Salah could obviously, do with a bit of a rest ahead of kind of the next couple of weeks before the World Cup. I know he's not going, but, just to kind of keep him, fresh and ready. I've gone with Firmino and Nunez, and I imagine it'll probably be Firmino, obviously just a bit behind him. And then obviously, like I say, if Nunez is kind of recovered, which it sounds like he has, let him lead the line and hopefully grab a few goals.
Doyle, your front 4?
I was just thinking of Milner, I think Milner will get at least half an hour because he's done quite well the last 2 times he's played. He didn't, he made an important block against West Ham. Made another one, admittedly, didn't make much difference against Forest. I thought he was a bit unlucky to be subbed, to be honest. I mean, there was quite a few other players who could have been subbed before him on Saturday, but maybe it was just because he didn't have the legs for it, or he may even be playing on Wednesday. But I wouldn't have him in the team. He'd certainly get half an hour though. In terms of the rest of the team, it'd be Salah on the right and Nunez up front. I think I'm going to go Curtis Jones on the left. But the interesting one is I'd play Elliott behind Salah. I think he's deserved to get into the team. No, not behind Salah, behind Nunez, sorry. I just think he deserved to be in the team. Maybe, actually, I've told myself out of that. No, put Fabinho there. This isn't the game to have him doing that. I think if they get through, they might try it against Napoli or do something different, and they certainly can do something against Derby in the League Cup. So let me just remind myself what my team was. It was Salah, Firmino, Jones, and Nunez up front. There you go. It is still Monday, isn't it? Yeah, good.
Yes, don't worry, you've not missed your flight. Lynchy, you've already talked us through, I think, haven't you? So just a reminder.
So Carvalho on the left, Firmino in behind, Salah on the right, and Nunez up top. I would quite like to see. I feel harsh on Elliott really taking him out of the team because I think he's been excellent this season. And I do really think that sort of right hand side in the 4-2-3-1 really sort of suits him down to the ground in terms of the mix of slightly less defensive responsibility and also an ability to impact things going forward. So I feel harsh taking him out, but I just think if you're going to have to use Carvalho probably on the left-hand side because of those injuries there. And I just don't, you lose a lot of goal threat if your two wingers are Carvalho and Elliott because they don't, between them have an awful lot of goals behind them at this stage of the career, even though I think in the long term they definitely will. So just putting him in this team at the same time is a bit of an issue for me at the moment. So that's why I would take Elliott out, but it's probably a harsh decision, to be honest.
Right, let's go for our match predictions then, Doyle. I'm going to go 2-0 to Liverpool, I think. I think we might see a bit of a reaction, bit of a different performance, but what do you reckon?
Ajax have to go for it, so they'll score, but I think Liverpool will win 2-1.
Lynchy?
Yeah, I quite like 2-1. I think, I'd be surprised if Liverpool kept a clean sheet, to be honest. So, yeah, I think 2-1. But Liverpool to win.
3-1. Would be different.
3-1.
Yeah, not confident, just different.
Well, I think we'd all take that. A point we'd all take, in fairness. So, yes, we shall see what happens. But we'll leave it there for now. Jurgen Klopp's press conference, obviously, to come tomorrow. You can catch that on the Blood Red YouTube channel. Open training for you as well, and plenty more build-up and reaction around the match. Until next time, though, it's goodbye for now.